Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin here as always with Toll McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. This is part 2 of our sweep of global news for the week. We closed part 1 with the idea that Trump owns the war with Iran. It's going to be very difficult for him to find a scapegoat, and that in turn might well make it more difficult for him to end this war. We kind of went through a few of the candidates. The one we did not get to was Vice President J.D. Vance, perhaps the most obvious scapegoat, Toll. J.D. Vance, I think, is a smart guy. We've talked before about how he very clearly leaked to the New York Times that he was against this war. And I think he did that precisely because he was worried that he could be the most obvious scapegoat. And what we have seen in the days since then, particularly this week, is him doing whatever he can to firm up his bona fides on the war and also firm up his bona fides as a real supporter of this administration.
He converted Catholicism, didn't he? Right.
Yes, he did.
Now, in my experience, converts are the most likely people to be the most fundamental in terms of their religion. And I've met people like that all through my life. The converts of Church of Ireland, converts to Catholicism, converts to Islam, the converts are always the most fundamental. And the Pope, right, he's seen as a religious figure. Going back to Pope John Paul II, they've also been seen as very political figures, okay? Pope John Paul kicked off the political popery, so to speak, and ever since, every pope, whether he's liked it or not, I mean, Ratzinger tried to slink away from the politics of popery and geopolitics. The popes now are genuine, serious hitters when it comes to politics. And
not in the way they used to be, though. Not like it was in the good old days. Well, 10, 1,200 years ago.
Yeah, okay. They were able to burn people alive and that kind of crap. But ever since Pope John Paul, the last couple of popes have been very, very political. Whether they like it or not, they send out these subtle statements via X or whatever the case may be, slightly castigating whoever's in power. And Vince, is about, 80 million Catholics in the United States, something to that effect, was there? 70?
It's somewhere, it's 70, 80 million. It's like 20% of the population. I will say the proportion of those who are not what we call Sunday Catholics is notably smaller. Catholics here stereotypically are not all that religious.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's the same all over Western Europe now as well at the moment. It's not America's on an outlier there.
Right.
But Trump attacking a Pope is a slight to J.D. Vance, isn't it?
You could see it that way. I'll be honest. That thought had not even occurred to me until you just said it. And I'm a little skeptical it occurred to Trump. I think I think somebody told him the Pope said something. He got came out on the friggin' tarmac and said, "Oh, I don't like this Pope. He's soft on crime," or whatever. Yeah, he is soft on crime. He's the Pope.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Jesus wasn't hugely pro-death penalty either.
POTUS versus Pontifex, Vincent. And a darkly amusing thing about the Vatican City is they actually have quite a high crime rate. A lot of pickpocketing.
Really?
Yeah, they do actually. All right, you look skeptical there. I'm
not skeptical. That wasn't skepticism. I was more surprised. As you're explaining it, as I'm thinking through, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see that.
Yeah, but, there's a zillion tourists every year. I think it's one of the most visited places on planet Earth, and there's pickpockets everywhere. And because of that, and because of its actually low population, like, how many people actually live in the Vatican,
right,
versus their crime rate, it skews things massively. So when you're looking at the data, it says to you, Jesus, the Vatican's one of the most dangerous places on planet Earth. They do have quite a high crime rate.
I'm surprised Elon hasn't retweeted somebody making that point. You make that point, you'll be famous on right-wing Twitter in about 30 seconds. Yeah, I don't think it's a slight against fans. It could kind of be seen that way. I do think that there's at least a potential for a rupture. I think that's why Vance has really hewed the administration's line on everything else. I think he kind of thinks like, okay, if I put this stuff out that I was kind of against the Iran war, that's the only thing that I can do. That's the only way I can have any daylight. Everything else, I got to jump. And so we saw him say this week that stopping aid to Ukraine was one of the Trump administration's proudest achievements, which was something that jumps out at you. And people were horrified by that. And I am too. I think that's a horrific thing to say. And it's a horrific thing that is true. But I also don't think that that's something J.D. Vance would have said publicly 3 months ago. I think he is saying that because he has to basically be in lockstep with Trump on every other thing so that the narrative doesn't build that he's an apostate, so to speak, to kind of,
All right. Pope J.D. Vance the first, is it? I mean, he did say he was a more accomplished theologian than the Pope Leo.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he went to Harvard. He's pretty smart.
Yeah, I see. I wonder about the American education system at the moment, Vincent. I'm really struggling with it, you know.
In what sense?
I mean, J.D. Vance went to Harvard, right?
Right.
Naturally, you think he's a smart guy. He's a book smart guy. I mean, he did pull himself up by his socks, got out of, Appalachia or something, was it?
His family's from there. He was from Ohio.
Right, okay. So he pulled himself up by his socks and from, working class nobody to Harvard. So, he has a bit of a moxie about him, as you say, in the United States. But just some of the statements that come out of their mouths leave me flabbergasted. Maybe it's not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of self-awareness, probably.
Yeah, see, I don't think it's either. That's what he particularly has to say right now. He has to say the things that Trump believes. Everything other than Iran, I think he just has to say it. He has to make sure that he's not the guy getting shoved overboard, because Trump is going to be looking for somebody to shove overboard. That process may already be beginning. And Bondi and Noam those are domestic appointments. Whether he believes that or not, I don't know. And he probably doesn't know. But he's doing the smart thing for his own career. And then we've spent 10 years now learning that that's the most important thing to J.D. Vance.
And do you know why J.D. Vance won't be president, in my opinion, Vincent?
Why is that?
It's not because he's a blithering idiot and his pronouncements have been mad. I think it's because he's Catholic. That's a whole new episode, probably. You're thinking in the back of your head, religion and the United States. So we'll get an episode of that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably interesting, worth just talk about for a minute. I think like a month ago, I would have said, oh, that's insane. Who cares? I think the fact that, like, if you really look at what's going on the right wing, the amount of anti-Catholic stuff that has just bubbled up seemingly out of nowhere is insane. Historically, the right wing has had no issue with Catholics. There are 6 Republican appointed Supreme Court justices. 5 of them are Catholic.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah. So this has never been a thing. I heard anti-Catholic stuff like a couple times growing up. I would have thought we were well behind it. But then you see like some of the stuff that is coming from evangelicals now about Catholicism. There is a sense that it's kind of like things that people kind of still believe. And I do know, like in the 90s, I had somebody who went to teach down in the rural South in a very evangelical Protestant place. And she was told, we don't really like the fact that you're teaching our kid and you're a Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
Famously, like the Ku Klux Klan was anti-Catholic, things like that. I kind of thought that was buried. Still think it's probably buried, but I have been surprised by some of the stuff, some of the intimations and some of the statements that have come out, not just from like social media random people, but kind of some broader anti-Catholic sentiment that I kind of assumed was a vestige of the past.
Well, as an Irishman, the vestiges of the past are always only skin deep, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There they are, I mean, you even see that in the protests recently. People being profiled in newspapers and, aspersions cast on their character because of their background and that kind of things. I mean, that stuff's always only skin deep. It doesn't matter where you are, the United States, Ireland, Timbuktu. You scratch the surface, you're going to find biases come to the surface pretty quickly.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think J.D. Vance's biggest problem right now is that he has so far in this term basically written a campaign ad for his primary opponents, which is just going to be, here's everything J.D. Vance tried to do for 18 months. And none of it works. Not a thing he tried.
Can I ask you something there, Vincent? A constitutional question for you. How can you get rid of a vice president? If Trump was miserable with him in the morning, right, he has to go. How do you get rid of a vice president? Then wasn't Spiro Agnew?
Yeah, Spiro Agnew was the one
fired.
Yeah,
fired,
but
wasn't he?
Agnew just resigned basically because there was a huge scandal. If the president goes, the vice president says you need to resign, the vice president says no, then he has to be impeached and removed. Right? He's an executive officer just like the president. It's no different.
All right, so Trump just can't offload him, feed him into the grinder, and go, "There's your mincemeat, away you go."
No. I mean, Trump could go quietly to Vance and say,
give him the bottle of gun and whiskey.
I think we're going to go in a different direction. If you resign, you can salvage your political career. And I would assume if it got to that point, that's what Vance would do. I can't imagine. I don't know what he's, because the other thing too, like we're poking fun at JD, and look, he hasn't gotten anything done. He just went to Hungary, and that, like, there's a great thing that somebody posted that on Polymarket, the odds of Orban winning the election actually started plunging literally the second Vance touchdown. As soon as he physically entered the country, the election was over. But where you do maybe have some sympathy for him is that the vice president is just such a job. It is just the worst. You have no power. You can't do anything. You have to toe the line of the president, even though you don't get to choose what he's saying. I mean, it's one of the worst jobs in politics.
Didn't Dick Cheney make the vice president's job into something, though, didn't he? He changed the nature of the vice presidency, I think.
He did, although I'll be honest, I am not 100% sure kind of how true that narrative was. Some of it seems to kind of be based, like it depends on who you talk to. That was a very common liberal argument leading up to Iraq. It was basically Bush is a moron and Dick Cheney is the evil genius who's like, pulling the strings behind all this. And I think if you kind of look back at the history of it, Cheney was much more involved than a lot of vice presidents have been because he was experienced, because he had a relationship with Bush's father. But there was this narrative like Cheney was actually the president, right? Bush was kind of the figurehead, like Putin and Medvedev in the Soviet in Russia at that time. But Cheney, managed to get some power, certainly. But like Kamala, like Harris, I mean, when she was vice president, I mean, all she did was basically go out and say all the politically damaging far left stuff that they didn't want Biden saying. So yeah, it's a rough job. So to your point, yeah, if Trump asked him to go, I think Vance would go. Constitutionally, if Vance said, no, I'm not going, I'm finishing out his term, then the only way he leaves, the only way he loses office is if he's impeached and removed from office the same way that a president would be. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you spoke about Vance going to Hungary there earlier, and Viktor Orban is out on his heir. Peter Magyar and his party have taken power. They swept the board there in Hungary. And I wonder, is this the beginning of something for national conservatism that is on its way out?
Yeah. Is it a peak? Yeah. Because it seems like it's been building momentum for years now.
So the result in Hungary should be a warning for Trump and his ilk and other movements around Europe or around the globe in terms of, the national strongman image. Because all Orban achieved was negative growth, an incredibly corrupt system, which we're seeing maybe in the United States at the moment in terms of real economy growth as opposed to S&P growth. There is a lot of corruption in the United States at the moment at the very top level.
Yep.
In Trump's orbit. It was the same with Orban. It's the same with Putin in Russia. Take your pick of strongmen. This should be the bellwether warning that people won't pull up with corruption on a massive scale that we've witnessed in Hungary. And I think I've seen some reaction in the United States also that there's increasing hope that come November, the Democrats might take both houses because things around Trump are so fractious, so corrupt, so immoral, despite J.D. Vance's religion. And what's needed here is an exorcism of Republicans.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm personally skeptical that the Democrats can quite take the Senate. Just sort of the way it broke, the races that are open this year are not particularly favorable to them. There's also the fact that they don't have any ability to do anything remotely helpful to actually win elections. So, this is not exactly like a crack squad. You're like, oh, look at the opportunity the Democrats have. They could really do some damage. What your sense is, oh, look at the opportunity the Democrats have. How are they going to this up? What stupid thing are they going to do? And, we still have the drum I've been beating a little bit about. I am still worried about how those elections are actually run and how involved Trump and his people want to get. We've had some stuff coming out from the White House this week, kind of buried by news, where they are telling their base that they have proof that Barack Obama committed treason, that all the stuff about Russia was a lie. They are referring people for criminal prosecutions and things like this. And again, I'm not going to go too crazy because I have said this before, but I'm just kind of throwing this out there because we're going to keep an eye on it. The idea that the Trump administration is really pushing a false reality around elections in particular, that 2020 was rigged, that January 6th was an unjust incarceration of patriots rather than a logical response to a riot. All these sorts of things. They are still on that path. And that is a very, very dangerous path indeed. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Democrats on paper are almost certainly going to win the House. They have a shot at the Senate if they can get their stuff together. But what exactly that winds up looking like once the votes are counted and people are trying to be sat is still a pretty big concern for me.
Now, you mentioned there that if the Democrats were a little bit more cohesive, they could do real damage and real kind of leaders. I mean, you strip away AOC and Newsom, I don't see any kind of big hitters going on there that could motivate the base. And similar for Ireland, if the fuel protesters had some people less frothing at the mouth and more organised, that this government would be in serious trouble.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah,
because what you have at the moment is banshees screeching across our Parliament chamber, and they're not very organised and they're not very cohesive. So the government should fear the day that somebody credible comes along, because that's when they'll be in real trouble.
Yeah, there's been a version of that argument made here for a long time about Trump. The guy that we talked about in our social media episode, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, liberals always pointed to him as being really scary because they said something similar, which is that if you can find a politician who can kind of capture Trump's base and capture that anger and push those policies, but also be organized and effective, the left here is in potentially real trouble. So yeah, there's a version of that argument to be made here as well.
Well, I mean, the caliber of Trump laid waste to what was going on with the Democrats, and he's not an intellectual. I think what you're trying to get at there is if you have somebody of intellectual means and has the political nous about him to get organised, and he has the intelligence to put his plans in place and properly plan instead of shooting from the mobile phone at 5 o'clock in the morning and through social, that's when you're in real trouble there. So
yeah. I think that's true.
That's quite a pessimistic way to end the podcast, Vincent.
We always say that we're ending in a pessimistic way, but
you want to talk about.
Yeah, we are not going to end in a pessimistic way. We are going to do a fun story here that we are going to close on.
The good old-fashioned tale.
Yeah, we always do that. There's like 25 of our episodes. We get to the end, we're like, it's a dark way to end, but it's politics. This time we're gonna end on a story that's actually much lighter. One of the wilder stories in American politics this century. And we got news this week that there's going to be kind of another chapter in that story. So we're going to have a little bit of fun and close with that.
Who is this Mark Sanford? His name rings a bell. Yeah, I didn't research him. I vaguely remember something about women. So
yeah, you may kind of remember the story more as we get into the details. But yeah, that's who we are talking about. Mark Sanford, who this week announced that he is running for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 1st District of South Carolina near the city of Charleston.
No, Vincent, how important is this election? Is it a big deal?
No, it's not important at all. Yeah, this is a completely safe Republican seat. As we'll get into, it could add a little bit of spice to Republican politics, let's say, as we'll see in a moment. But no, this is not really critical in terms of controlling the House or anything like that.
Now, may I interject there and say what Republicans need in their politics at the moment is a lot less spice.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So Sanford is running, not for the first time. The first time he ran for this seat was actually back in 1994. He was 34 years old. He had no political experience, and he won. Now, 1994, he is part of a wave of Republicans. This is the Republican Revolution, Contract with America, led by Newt Gingrich, all that. Some listeners may remember that. Their platform is very much fiscal conservatism. The national debt at the time is about $4.5 trillion. And people like Sanford are running because they believe that it's an existential crisis that has to be taken care of.
Not much has changed there then. How much are you in debt now?
Yeah, the national debt now is $39 trillion.
Oh, is that all? All right, okay. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, it did not quite go the way that they planned. But what I will say up front, because we're going to have a little bit of fun with Sanford in a minute, he really does believe that this is a problem and a serious problem, and he really tries to fix it. He actually, as a politician, has some principles. He serves 3 terms in Congress. He wins in 94. It's pretty smooth sailing after that. He votes against all these spending bills. He votes against what we call pork. Do you guys have that term here? We call it pork barrel spending.
He called it, so the Healy Rays, back to these guys, were famous for this. We'll support the government if you give us a zoo for Killorglin or a wildlife park for Tralee or something, which is, a lot of people would argue that Tralee is a bit of a wildlife park. Yes, we know what pork barrel politics is, yes.
So, and he comes out against this, actually votes against bills that have pork barrel projects for his own district and stuff. By politician standards, certainly, he has some principles. He serves 3 terms and he leaves. Again, this is a little bit principled. All those Republicans elected in 94, they had all said that they were strongly in favor of term limits. Toll, you will be stunned to know that when these people got to the point where they had promised that they were going to leave, some of them went, well, I don't know. Maybe that whole term limits thing was overblown. So he leaves. He goes back to his wife and his 4 sons in South Carolina. In 2002, he runs for governor. He wins. He's governor of South Carolina. Again, he is a fiscal conservative. Again, he sticks to his principles. His Wikipedia page has a great story that he vetoed a budget. The veto was overridden, which is a process. 2/3 of the legislature can basically override his veto. And the Republican-led legislature overrode the veto. The next day, he brought 2 live pigs into the House chamber. And of course, what do? They go ahead and on the floor. So,
right. I kind of like this guy. I like this guy.
Yeah, I know. You kind of would at this point. Yeah. And he's reelected in 2006. He supports McCain in 2008. He's mentioned kind of as a long shot, dark horse, potential choice for vice president. McCain loses. And as everybody starts looking at 2012, people go, Sanford is probably going to run for the GOP nomination that year. And people are starting to say, this guy has a shot to be the nominee, and if things break the right way, he has a shot to actually be president.
This guy's an accomplished guy in terms of politics and American politics. In Ireland, he'd be a very serious player.
I think he is on the path to being a serious player. I mean, we said this is going to be a light story, and it is a funny story. It's not to this point. It's really, he is a guy who is in pretty good shape. There's another aspect to consider, which is as we get into 2009, the worst of the financial crisis, the Tea Party movement is starting to build here, and they are very, very anti-government. So he has positioned himself kind of right where the Tea Party wants its candidates to be, as a guy who's really honestly trying to make the government smaller.
Okay.
So, yeah. So far, it's just a story about a guy who maybe had a shot to be president. But on a Thursday in June 2009, Mark Sanford gets in a black SUV and he leaves the governor's mansion. Depending on who's telling the story, he doesn't tell his staff anything about where he's going, or he suggests or tells someone he is going to hike the Appalachian Trail. Do people in Ireland know what that is?
It's like the Wild Atlantic Way. It's just a trail up through Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's a hiking-only trail. It's 2,200 miles long. It goes from Maine to Georgia. Yeah, right. Supposedly the longest hiking trail in the world.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I have a friend who set out to do this. He spent weeks preparing and getting ready, and he was going to go hike the Appalachian Trail, and he went 6 miles.
Right, okay.
Which is why he's
exhausting.
My friend. Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's it's 800 or 900 people a year do the entire thing. But 2,200 miles, I mean, it's what? It's a 4 or 5 month odyssey. Okay. Obviously, he's not doing the whole thing, but he's going to go, as far as everyone knows, he's going to hike the Appalachian Trail. As we are soon going to find out, this is not true. And hiking the Appalachian Trail will become a euphemism, particularly in American politics, for doing adult activities
with somebody that's not your wife. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Over the next 3 days, literally no one in the state of South Carolina can reach him. He has turned off his phone. No one's sure where he is. On Friday, state law enforcement, they need to talk to him. They're trying to call him. He doesn't answer. The next day, they reach out to his staff and they're like, hey, you guys know where the governor is? And the staff's like, no, we don't know where he is, but he's fine. And the police are like, what do you mean? You don't know where he is? No, we have no idea. Sunday comes. He still has not talked to anyone. No one in Columbia, the state capital, knows where the governor is. Now on Sunday, he's been gone 3 days and it starts to get to the legislature. And he's fought with the legislature over spending. So they're not exactly inclined to cover all this up for him.
Okay.
And one of the state representatives calls the police and they're like, do you know where the governor is? And the police are like, nope, we have no idea. And he puts out a statement going, we need to find out where the governor is because we're not in charge. We're not sure who's in charge of the state of South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
This all get a bit weird.
Now he's been gone 4 days. Monday, the press gets wind. And it goes from being a local story to a national story in a hurry. I mean, this is on the evening news in America on Monday night. The governor of South Carolina is missing. And his staff keeps saying, oh, no, he's just decompressing. They call his wife. His wife goes, no, I don't know where he is, but I'm sure he's fine. He said he was going to go somewhere and write a book. Yeah. And people are like, all right, something really weird's going on here. There's people are starting to wonder if he's dead, if something did something happen?
Let me stop you there, Vincent, right? So the head of state, he's the main guy in the state. He's the president, the equivalent of president of the state, for want of a better word. He's governor of the state, top dog, and he disappears off planet Earth.
Off planet Earth, yeah. Literally, no one knows where he is.
Yeah, which is bizarre because, I mean, if that happens in any other country, there's SWAT teams and, search parties, but they waited 4 days.
This is a weird thing to do, but for him, it's not that weird. There are stories that come out after this whole scandal unfolds that he had constantly, for instance, tried to ditch his security detail so that he could go walk in a field or drive his car. Like, he is a guy who would disappear for like 2 days and not talk to anybody.
Okay.
So it does make a little bit of sense to the people around him that he's done this. But the problem is, once the press gets involved on Monday, national reporters they're not tuned into this guy being a little goofy. They're just going, the governor's been missing for 4 days. It's front page news. And then at 10 o'clock on Monday, his staff puts out the official statement. He's hiking on the Appalachian Trail. We don't know where he is. We can't contact him. Now, remember, this is also 16 years ago. Like, in those days, if you had a cell phone and you were on the Appalachian Trail, that cell phone was a brick.
Yeah, you might as well have been in West Cork or something. So where is he?
He is in Argentina.
What?
Yeah,
that's about 4,000 miles from where he's been.
Yeah. He has flown to see. You could call her his mistress, but we'll talk in a second about maybe that's an unfair word. But yes, he is with a woman in Argentina who is not his wife. And as far as we can tell, legitimately, his staff did not know. They come out Monday night and they say, no, he's on the Appalachian Trail. And because for months, people are like, they want his staff gone. They think he lied. But as far as we know, Sanford actually completely deceived his staff. They thought, maybe didn't know he was on the trail, but they thought he was just being himself. Okay. They finally get a hold of him on Tuesday. According to one report, he's like, they get a hold of him and they're like, dude, you got to come back. It's national news. And he's like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, you've been gone for 5 days. I'm like, the New York Times is covering this. It's on, like, it was the lead story on NBC News. And evidently Sanford's like, why is everybody making such a big deal about this? He finally flies back on Wednesday. The staff come down. They say, okay, look, we found him. He's coming back. Somehow a reporter finds out that he is in Argentina. At this point, no one knows it. She goes to the airport and catches him. And she's like, hey, we were told you're on the Appalachian Trail. And he goes, oh, yeah. I told my staff I was going to go to the Appalachian Trail, but the last minute I just had on a whim. I changed my mind. Right. I decided I would fly to Argentina in the winter. So this story lasts like 6 hours. No one's buying it. And everybody kind of figures out pretty quick what's going on. So he has to do the whole press conference thing. He admits that he had an affair. He says that this woman is his soulmate. He had known her for years, and evidently, like, his wife knew about her. And it sounds like he basically told his wife, I'm in love with this woman. And she kind of told him to go talk to his pastor and things like that to try and break that and save their marriage. His wife leaves. The kids leave, of course. He does not get impeached from office, believe it or not, for kind of inside politics reasons we don't need to get into. But he serves out his term in 2011. And obviously that's it, right? His political career's over.
Okay. I have a question there, Vincent.
Sure.
So you say the wife and kids, were they living in the governor's mansion with him?
Yeah, because he's only like 48, 50 years old when this happened. So yeah, the kids must have still been at home. Yeah.
I mean, that's not a great look, throwing your wife into the governor's mansion. So, I mean, that's terminal for a political career, usually, isn't it?
It is. But believe it or not, 2 years later, his old district, there's a special election because the representative there has been appointed to the U.S. Senate. There are 16 candidates for the Republican nomination, which is the only one that matters. Sanford has massive name recognition. He runs, he wins. 2 years after this, he is back in the U.S. House of Representatives, believe it or not. Wow. Serves three terms. He is a pretty regular critic of Trump before and after the presidential election. Trump doesn't like him. In 2018, someone runs against Sanford in the primary. Trump, on election day, comes out and endorses the person challenging Sanford, and he loses. So now his political career is definitely over. So I'm going to ask you this, Tolson. You certainly have not dealt with this specific situation, I don't think. I would hope you did. I don't know. Is there an Irish equivalent?
No, there's not.
If you were advising Mark Sanford in 2018 after he has lost the election and left the House, what next steps would you advise him?
To go live in Argentina, which won Buenos Aires, a lovely part of the world. And when they're not, having protests over inflation and job losses, Buenos Aires is a wonderful place. Great rugby teams there, so I'd highly recommend it. I'd say take yourself off to Buenos Aires, lie low, sit around, take a trip to Patagonia. Wonderful country.
I think that would normally be good advice. There is one problem. He gets engaged to this woman from Argentina. They break off the engagement in 2014. They are not soulmates. He does not take your advice, though. I think your advice, just go chill out. I mean, he's from Charleston, which is a wonderful city. Go hang out there. He decides in 2019 that what he's going to do, he's going to run for president.
Oh.
And to be clear, president of the United States, not presidents of the Chamber of Commerce in South Charleston. Yeah. Right. His campaign lasts, I think, like 6 weeks. I'm sure he raised like $20. But it is kind of funny. His campaign, to the extent it existed, he centers it on the budget deficit. And he is trying to peel off Republicans saying, look, this is the budget deficit has to get fixed. Trump isn't fixing it. We need voice. So that doesn't last. Now he's really done. There is a woman a journalist covering his campaign whose name is Olivia Nuzzi. And she has made she has made the news recently for inappropriate contact and communications with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he was running for president. And Nuzzi's ex-fiance is another journalist named Ryan Lizza, and he went on Substack to basically write a tell-all gossip thing about Nuzzi. And his first post, he writes this very long thing and about how he discovered that Nuzzi, his fiance, was having an affair with a politician. And he writes he found this note and all this stuff, and it was a politician who's 30 years older. And as you go along, it's very obviously the story of how Nuzzi and RFK Jr. met, except until you get to the bombshell at the end. And Lizza has written the article in a way to make you think it's RFK, but in fact, Sanford and Nuzzi had an affair, while he was covering her. So, that is kind of like the capper to his just bizarre, wayward political career, sex scandals, but he's back for one more round. So,
is he going to win? Is he favorite?
I honestly don't know. I would imagine people in the local market maybe don't necessarily know. He entered very late. I think there are 13 people in the primary. So it very well could be what happened in the special election, which, by the way, if you really want to kind of get crazy about this, is also what really helped Donald Trump in 2015. There were 16 candidates in that election, and he had the most name recognition, and none of them could really build up enough support to stop him. So I think it's absolutely possible that Sanford could win again, no doubt.
Yes. Any political worth their salt will tell you name recognition is very, very important. I will say this in Ireland, Vincent, that we don't do sex in politics at all. Full stop.
Okay. So you're not French.
We're not French, no.
Like, in France, it's like a scandal if you run for office and you don't have any mistresses. People are like, I'm not voting for this guy.
You need at least one mistress.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you an anecdote here that I have to be careful what I say. So I'm not going to give timelines or any of this, but one particular minister in the past, I will say this, Fianna Fáil minister, many moons ago, was famous for lobbing the gob on anybody he could up in Dublin while his wife and kids were long suffering back in another part of the country.
I don't want to interrupt. What did you just say? Lobbying the gob?
Not lobbying the gob, lob the gob.
Lob the gob?
Yes, as in stick his head in, stick his tongue down her throat, lob the gob.
I understand. I knew from context clues, I knew you're talking about. I just never heard that phrase. All right, all right. I wish I was still single because I would be using that all the time.
Yeah.
Good.
So this particular minister was famous for lobbing the gob on anybody, that came in within his range of vision, to be perfectly honest. And it was an open secret.
Right.
And everybody knew about it. It wasn't, it wasn't swept under the rug. It wasn't, oh, did you hear such and such? And there was no gossip columns about it. There was no exposés about it. There was nothing in any of the tabloids about it. Everybody knew about it, but nobody would blow the whistle. And he's not the only one, in fairness. I mean, they've been at it since the foundation of the state, but we just don't do sex in politics.
About that.
I have a theory about that. This goes all the way back to Kitty O'Shea and Charles Stewart Parnell.
Oh, yeah. I do know a little about that story, but not a lot. Yeah.
And it was basically sex that brought down the uncrowned King of Ireland up there in Leitrim, County Wicklow. And we haven't done sex in politics since, to be perfectly honest.
I love that.
We don't allow sex to bring down a politician, no matter how immoral he might be in his bedroom or, away from his family and stuff like that.
Interesting.
On a hopeful note to end the podcast, if you're
awesome, yeah, we pulled it off. Humor and hope. Good Lord.
Yes.
All right.
So,
yeah.
as a good way to end the podcast, if you're a politician looking to score in Dublin while your family's in rural Ireland, you're probably going to get away with it, to be perfectly honest. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.